great to be here and to talk about this topic. Is Google good for history? Of course it is. We historians are searchers and sifters of information and evidence, and Google is probably the most powerful tool ever given to us or any other human beings to do just that. It has constructed a deceptively powerful and simple way to scan billions of documents instantaneously. It has spent hundreds of millions of dollars of its own money to allow us to read millions of books in our pajamas. Good. How about great? But then we historians, like other humanities scholars, are natural-born critics. You can find fault with nearly anything, and we do. And this disposition has unsurprisingly exacerbated when a large company, consisting mostly of better-paid graduates from the other side of campus, muscles into our turf. Had Google spent hundreds of millions of dollars on the Widener Library at Harvard, we would have complained about all those steps to the front entrance. Partly out of fear and partly out of envy, I think it's easy to take shots at Google. While it seems that an obsessive book about Google comes out every week, where are the volumes of criticisms about ProQuest or Elsevier or other large information companies that serve the academic market in more troubling ways? These companies, which also provide search and information services, charge universities exorbitant rates for the privilege of access. They leach money out of library budgets every year that could be going to other, more productive uses. Google, on the other hand, gives us Google Books, Google Scholar, scan newspaper archives, and more, often vesting commercial offerings and often being completely free. In this bigger picture, away from the myopic obsession with the biggest tech company at the moment, and I'm sure some of you can remember the same obsessions and diatribes against Microsoft and IBM in prior eras, Google has been very good for history and historians. And one can only hope that they continue to exert pressure on those who provide costly alternatives. Of course, like many others who feel a special bond with books and our cultural heritage, I wish that Google Books was a project not under the control of a private entity. For years, I've called for a public project, as have many others, or at least a university consortium to scan books on the scale that Google is attempting. And I must admit I'm envious of the recent announcement in France to spend $1 billion on public scanning. In addition, the center I work at, the Direct, Center for History and New Media, has a long-standing partnership with the Internet Archive to put content in a non-profit environment that will maximize its utility and distribution and make that content truly free in all senses of the word. I would much rather see Google Books at the Internet Archive or at the Library of Congress or somewhere else. But the likelihood of a publicly funded scanning project in the age of Tea Party reactionism is slim. Now, longtime readers of my blog and other writing know that I have not pulled punches when it comes to Google. To this day, the biggest spike in readership on my blog was when, very early in Google Books' scanning project, I casually posted a scan of a human hand covering a page of Plato. And the post ended up on Dig, and since then it's been one of the many examples detractors of Google use to show lack of quality in the library project. So let's discuss these quality issues for a brief moment, since it is one point of obsession in the academy. And it's an obsession that I feel, as you'll see, is slightly misplaced. Of course, Google has some poor scans. As the saying goes, haste makes waste. But I've yet to see a scientific survey of the overall percentage of pages that are unreadable or missing, and surely they are a minuscule fraction of the total. And regarding metadata errors, as John Orwan of Google Books has noted, when you're dealing with a trillion pieces of metadata, you're sure to get a million or two wrong. And let us also not pretend that the bibliographic world beyond Google is perfect. Many of the metadata problems in Google Books comes from library partners and others outside of Google. More important, Google likely has remedies, and I assume Brandon will talk about these, for many of these inadequacies. Google is constantly improving its OCR capability and metadata correction, often in clever ways. It recently purchased and acquired the reCAPTCHA system, which some of you may have heard of from Carnegie Mellon, which uses unwitting humans to transcribe difficult or smudged words from their books when they log into sites. And they've recently added a feedback mechanism for users to report poor scans right on the page they're viewing. So I find myself a bit nonplussed by quality complaints about Google Books that have engineering solutions. That's what Google does. It solves engineering problems extremely well. Indeed, we should recognize, and not without criticism, as I will note momentarily, that at its heart, Google Books is the outcome, like so many other things at Google, of an engineering challenge and its associated series of mathematical problems. How can you scan tens of millions of books in a decade? It's easy to say they should do a better job and get all the details right, but if you do the calculations with those key variables, as I assume Brandon and his team have done, you'll probably see that getting a nearly perfect library scanning project would take 100 years rather than 10. Now that might be a perfectly fine trade-off, but that's a different argument or a different project. And of those who are involved with OCR know, getting from 99% accuracy to 99.9% accuracy, which by the way would still have hundreds of thousands of errors, would probably still take an order of magnitude longer and an order of magnitude greater expense. So that's the trade-off Google has decided to make. And as a company interested in search where near 100% accuracy is unnecessary, and considering the possibilities for iterating toward perfection from an imperfect first version, it must have been an easy decision for the company to make. Google Books is incredibly useful even with these flaws. Although I was trained at places with large research libraries of Google Books scale, I'm now at an institution that is far more typical of higher ed, with a mere 1 million volumes and a few rare books. At places like Mason, Google Books is a savior, enabling research that can only be done if you got into the right places. I regularly have students find new topics to research and new discoveries through their searches on Google Books. And you can only imagine how historical researchers and other scholars and students feel in even less privileged places. Despite its flaws, it's undoubtedly true that Google Books will have a tremendous impact on historical scholarship around the globe over the coming decades. It is a tremendous leveler, a democratizer of access to historical resources. Google is also good for history in that it challenges age-old assumptions about the way we've done history. Before the dawn of massive digitization projects and their equally important indices, we necessarily had to pick and choose from a sea of analog documents. All that searching and sifting we did, and the particular documents and evidence we chose to write on, and continue to choose to write on, were and are, and let's admit it, prone to errors. Read it all, we were told in graduate school. But whoever does, we sift through large archives based on intuition. Sometimes we even find important evidence out of sheer luck. We've sometimes made mountains out of molehills because, well, we only have time to sift through molehills, not mountains. Regardless of our technique, we always leave something out in this analog world. This world has rarely been a world of comprehensive historical search. This widespread problem of anecdotal history, as I call it, will only get worse as more documents are scanned and go online. Many works of historical scholarship will be exposed as flimsy and haphazard. The existence of modern search technology should push us to improve historical research. It should tell us that our analog, necessarily partial methods have hidden from us the potential of taking a more comprehensive view, aided by less capricious retrieval mechanisms, which, despite what detractors might say, are often more objective than leafing rapidly through folios on a time-limited jump to an archive.